Good morning, Liberty. It is Wednesday morning, December the 12th, 2018. My name is Michael Bolden. Thank you for tuning in, watching, or listening. We are broadcasting live here through YouTube, our channel at the 10th Amendment Center, youtube.com/10th Amendment Center. On the West Coast, 9:30 a.m. Pacific time here in my home office and studio. And thanks for stopping by my apartment. It's pretty cool to have you here with me. And I want to say hi to a couple of people out in the live chat. First to Matt Hugh and, of course, to Joseph Standridge. I appreciate you guys being here and saying hello. And, of course, for smashing the like button. One of the best ways that you can help us spread the word is to smash the like button and to leave comments, share links, wherever you happen to be watching, whether it's YouTube or elsewhere. We've been doing a lot of conversations here on this show about surveillance. I guess I got to go back. Hello to Jeremy Anderson. Alan Mosley always said he wanted to go home. Dude, you just need to get out of Tennessee and stop here on the West Coast for a visit, and we are definitely going to eat a hot dog sandwich. So it'd be good to hang out if you ever take a vacation, Alan. So anyways, we're doing a lot of surveillance conversations here, and I think this is one of the biggest issues today because it pervades so many others. And we're getting hammered with report after report after report. So I want to share all the information that I'm finding with you, and I'm not even covering all of it. For example, we had a report from Mass Private Eye on our blog about the New Orleans DHS. They have their own Department of Homeland Security there in New Orleans, which I'm assuming is fully funded by the federal DHS. And they have this Share a Cam kind of a community surveillance program where you can set up a camera and spy on everybody and help them. And of course, all that data gets shared as if the police are not already collecting enough information. They just want to camerize basically the whole world, these people. So anyways, the latest one that kind of follows up on some of the conversations that we've had here recently, like the thermal imaging, trying to detect concealed carry, the Stingray devices, license plate readers, always the TSA, is this new TSA biometric kind of roadmap, what they really want to do in the airports. And I think it really only starts in the airports. We've been hearing for years that the TSA wants to expand their power and their kind of presence to all public transit. We know they've done test runs, I think in Tennessee, maybe it was in Nashville, they did test runs at bus stops, also in D.C. at the Metro. Here in Los Angeles, they added some thermal imaging type of surveillance, or they're going to be putting those in the L.A. Metro subway stations. I mean, they definitely want to be everywhere. I don't think that it is inconceivable for them to claim that, oh, well, we're just protecting the freeways and the sidewalks at some point. If you don't resist what they do at one level, you're going to look back on it in 10, 15 years and be like, man, how did we get here? All of a sudden they want to start doing facial recognition on everybody. And then you think back like, oh, okay, the SS did that, and I mean the Secret Service, did that pilot program in 2018 to test facial recognition surveillance of people walking in the area of the White House and adjacent parks because they want to make sure to protect the White House from terrorism. Well, got to expand that just to make sure that they're not lining up a little bit beyond that. And this is how this type of mission creep happens. And my a colleague named Hamid Khan, who runs an organization called Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. You may have heard me mention this if you listen to the show or you watch it. He's a Marxist who focuses most of his work on surveillance by the Los Angeles Police Department, doing things what they call predictive policing, so basically pre-crime, and then surveillance, just pervasive surveillance everywhere. And his view is, hey, and he's told me, hey, Michael, you can't go soft like the ACLU does and just try to require a warrant or restrict how they use these devices. His view is basically, how can you trust these government officials to ever utilize invasive surveillance technology? Because they have proven to us over and over and over again that they never follow the rules given to them. And I think there is something valid on that, and I actually agree with it. Although I don't think it's possible to ban them, their use, I think you have to hold to that principle at all points, that you can't trust them. And in fact, that's Thomas Jefferson's advice. after he wrote the Kentucky resolutions of 1798, after those were passed, he wrote a letter to James Madison sending a copy, and he basically said, here's a copy of the Kentucky Resolves. I think we should hold to all the important principles they contain. In other words, hold the line on the principles, but we should also consider the situation and push as far as events will render prudent. So I'm willing to take the Jefferson approach, which is a step-by-step strategy, always with an eye on the flag, an eye on the goal, an eye on the Constitution and liberty, but recognizing that as long as steps are moving in that direction, never let up. So, but we also do have to keep in mind that government agents cannot be trusted with this technology because they always keep expanding it. And so let's talk a little bit about the TSA today. First of all, it shouldn't exist. So let's get past that. It shouldn't exist. It's a horrible organization. It's security theater. It's centralized control. It's not something that's delegated to the federal government and the Constitution, and on and on and on. It fails at all of its tests. So when they do kind of secret shopper tests and try to sneak weapons through or bomb residue, it fails to the tune of like 90+% of the time. It does not catch the things, at least in the last few years where I had seen these types of studies done. And I actually told my partner Sarah, one of her cousins is a pilot, and I had mentioned this. We were at their place, their old place near Kansas City a few years ago, and I said, "Oh yeah, you know, I was talking about that." And his response, and I thought this was kind of surprising. He says, "Wait, how do you know about that?" As if this was supposed to be kind of a closed secret. Maybe it's an open secret that the TSA really sucks at what they do. Not only should they not exist, they're just bad at what they do. I think someone could maybe make a better case for them if they actually did a good job and didn't violate anyone's rights, but I don't think it's possible based on how they operate. They basically treat everyone as a suspect, and that's not in line with the Constitution. So, before getting too deep into that, let's look at this EFF report from late last week. I think it was last week, Friday. TSA's roadmap for airport surveillance moves in a dangerous direction. The Transportation Security Administration, this is from India McKinney, December 7th, 2018, at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is an excellent organization when it comes to privacy, has set out an alarming vision of pervasive biometric surveillance at airports, which cuts against the right to privacy, the right to travel, and the right to anonymous association with others. I don't like that they put the right to travel in quotes. I haven't clicked the link that they put there, but it kind of implies that it's not really a right. But, you know, this is a natural right for you to be able to move freely, to think freely, to speak freely, to protect yourself. These are natural rights that, although a lot of them are listed in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights, it's not that the Constitution is somehow granting you those rights. It's an attempt to tell government that it's not supposed to violate them. And now, mind you, words on paper don't enforce themselves, so you can't count on the Constitution to enforce itself. A set of rules can be very good, but they're only as good as the people who are willing to enforce them. So the TSA has this alarming vision, according to EFF. And they go on to write, the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018, which included language that we warned would provide implied congressional endorsement to biometric screening of domestic travelers and U.S. citizens, became law in early October. The ink wasn't even dry on that bill when the TSA published their Biometrics Roadmap for Aviation Security and Passenger Experience, detailing TSA's plans to work with the Customs and Border Protection to roll out increased biometric collection and screening for all passengers, including Americans traveling domestically. All passengers. Their goal is to collect biometric information on everybody. Biometrics could be anything. It could be DNA. It could be a thumbprint or a fingerprint. It could be an eye scan. It could be a scan, a recording of your gait. It could be facial recognition. There's so many different ways that they collect biometrics. Let's see what they're doing. So they start out with TSA PreCheck, which is a scary thing in and of itself, where you're basically signing yourself over to the TSA to avoid the long lines. And I had heard some conspiracy theorist friends tell me a few years ago when this whole thing with the TSA really ramped up. They're like, man, I bet the whole plan was to make everyone get really inconvenienced, so they just can't stand it. So then they would be willing to accept something worse for the sake of convenience. And I think TSA PreCheck does fit that bill, whether it was an intentional plan or not. Well, I think government is pretty incompetent. It can't even deliver a letter to my mother in a reasonable amount of time, most times. So I don't think they're very competent, but then again, maybe they are on stuff like this. And I know a lot of people make a similar argument on Obamacare. This was designed to fail, I hear, so that you can usher in single payer. Of course, the problem is an uneducated or a lazy general population, people who are willing to give up their liberty for safety, as if you can be safe without freedom. I mean, there is no liberty versus safety debate, really. You can only be safe when you're free. Because if you don't have the freedom to protect yourself, you're then relying on government to do it, and government sucks. Government doesn't want to protect you. In fact, I think there's a Supreme Court case where they're not even required to protect you. So this is a warning. 5 million people are in the TSA PreCheck program already. I think it's going to get more. Supposedly, it's a convenient way to cut down on wait times at the airport. You pay a fee, and you give them fingerprints for a background check. And I think it actually opens up to, not that they don't already have it, but now you're giving consent for them to monitor your internet activities. So the roadmap going forward from where we already are, it, quote, outlines TSA's plans to expand use of those prints beyond the background check to other uses throughout the airport, such as for security at the bag drop or for identity verification at security checkpoints. So you just scan your thumb and, okay, you're good to go. TSA has already rolled this out as a pilot program in 2017 at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport and the Denver International Airport. They used prints from the PreCheck database and a contactless fingerprint reader to verify the identity of PreCheck approved travelers at security checkpoints at both airports. Now, we don't have to be very creative to think of convenient ways they might use this elsewhere. And India goes on, she writes, or he, I'm not sure, India McKinney. I don't know who India McKinney is. I'm going to click through. Is a female legislative analyst at EFF. Okay, so she goes on to write, even more concerning, the roadmap outlines a strategy to capture biometrics from American travelers who haven't enrolled in PreCheck and who never consented to any biometric data collection from the TSA. They just want to get everybody. They want to scan everybody. They want to monitor your eyes, your walk, probably the sound of your voice. They just want all this information. And in the hands of an organization like the TSA, who is going to share it with everybody else. Now, if you watched our show a couple of weeks ago on automated license plate readers, it's titled 2.5 billion. This was the number of license plate scans that 200, now this is a small number compared to all of them, 200 law enforcement agencies around the country collected 2.5 billion license plate scans of people driving. They take a picture of the license plate. They note where that license plate is, so they are tracking where people are traveling. This is a right to travel issue again. They're monitoring where people are going. 2.5 billion over a 2-year period, and 99.5% of them were never suspected of any criminal activity. So they basically are tracking people's travel behavior and building a profile on those people and sharing it with everybody. So the Honolulu Police Department collects it. The Austin Police Department has access to that travel history. So does the Boise, Idaho. So does the DHS, as FBI. So local law enforcement and federal police, or federal police, that's a bad phrase. Federal law enforcement or federal agencies are all sharing this information. Speaking of federal police, I tweeted the other day, I'm at Michael Bolden. I know Joseph Standridge follows me over there, and Alan Mosley. We always have some fun chats. I had tweeted the other day talking about this bill that I was looking at. This time of year, as bills are being filed or starting to be filed, now January and February, for the 2019 legislative session. Every single day I spend 1 to 2 hours reading through hundreds and hundreds of bills. Mind you, this is something you would rather probably stab your eye for. The amount of control that these legislators want to have over people's lives is very insightful. Now, there are some really good gems. So, for example, we've covered some bills that have been filed in Texas on asset forfeiture, the right to keep and bear arms, constitutional carry bills, also in Georgia. There's a really good asset forfeiture bill that we reported on this morning that I'll cover in a show very soon. I want to do a show on what is asset forfeiture and the federal equitable sharing program that associates with it. So there are some good things. But I noticed that there's this guy in Arkansas, a Republican, who seems to have not wanted enough federal control in his state or enough federal law enforcement agencies in his state. So he filed a bill to give federal agents with the Social Security Administration arrest powers under the state. Now, I don't know what the mentality of that is, but it's almost like these people really want a nationwide police force. Joe Standridge says, I live in Atlanta. The TSA sucks at Hartsfield-Jackson. I've noticed, surprisingly enough, here at LAX in Los Angeles, it has gotten less bad, partly because, and sometimes the massive cities become a surveillance nightmare, a law enforcement, a government control nightmare, but sometimes it's the other way around because it's so big. It just becomes unwieldy for them to be able to deal with it. So my worst experiences at airports with the TSA in the last 2 to 3 years. When it first started, when the pat-down situation first started, it was always the worst at the big cities. New York City, Washington, D.C., LAX. I mean, German Shepherds, really, like, when they do the pat-down, they're jamming there. They're really, really messing with you hardcore. But I've noticed in some of the bigger cities, at least here in L.A., they're just kind of chill. Maybe they're all high because LAX allows people to have weed in the airport now and travel through the airport with marijuana. I don't know. So the small airports, in my experience, have been really aggressive. I think you get these guys that are gung-ho on really trying to enforce these TSA regulations. So I'm sure Atlanta is awful, especially because they now have this kind of pervasive biometric plan there. But I'm getting off track. So they're really trying to, according to India at the TSA, as she reports, they're trying to get people into this biometric surveillance system. And here's some of the things that it outlines. The roadmap explicitly outlines plans for TSA and CBP to collect any biometrics they want from all travelers. All travelers, American or foreign, international or domestic, wherever they are in the airport. They want to collect biometrics on everybody. Again, like the license plate reader situation, they want to collect this information and track you and surveil you and spy on you and build profiles on you and share that data with everybody everywhere for the crime of traveling. I mean, they're really treating travel as a privilege where your choice is, I want to have some privacy or I get to travel. And that is a very, very dangerous situation. That data will be stored, she writes, in a widely shared database that could be used to track people outside airport context. For example, TSA's PreCheck as well as Clear. If you're familiar with Clear, this is something they're pre-installing, I think, on Lincoln vehicles. You basically get a biometric scanner in your car. And so as you're going to the airport, you get the convenience of showing up already ready to go. Have begun using their technology at stadiums to allow visitors, and they put allow in quotes. That's a very good way to approach it, to allow visitors a faster entry. So again, it's all given to people on the pretext of convenience. And certainly government is inconvenient. It creates a mess all over the place. I would think government urban planners create a problem with their zoning, with the way they design freeways, with the way they do security at airports, with the way they run the post office, the DMV. They're all a mess. No one wants to. I think about stopping at the post office and I'm like, man, I got to get something done this time instead of like just checking the P.O. box or dropping off some mail. And I dread going there because not only am I going to wait in line for an understaffed window But when I get there, they're not going to listen to me. They're going to be irritated by my questions. They're going to treat me like garbage, and they don't care. It's like if you report it to somebody, no one's getting fired from this government job for being a jerk. It's almost like they only hire people who are rude. I apologize if there's any very friendly postal workers out there, but who knows? Back over to the chat. Hi to Idamon. Good to see you here today, sir. Good morning, TAC. Nada Seattle says the greatest center of all is the 10th. And Idamon also points out that reminds me of an old document discussing travel being a right. If you find that, either post a link here or feel free to email it my way. I have not really covered that, but they want to treat travel as a privilege. Oh, cool. At constitution.org, John Rowland's website. Spencer says, you've described every interaction I've had at post offices. In a way, this is the way it is when you show up at the airport, too. You should give them your ID and you show your ticket, and they're jerks. I mean, sometimes they've gotten a little bit friendly. There are human beings there as well. So India notes that this is a big, big change. Basically, collecting information from everybody, whether they've opted into pre-check or not, and then using that same information for fast access to stadiums or to other events, concerts. I'm sure it'll expand beyond that. This is a big, big change. It is unprecedented for the government to collect, store, and share this kind of data, she writes, with this level of detail, with this many agencies and private partners. We know that security lines are a huge pain, but we are concerned that travelers getting used to biometric tracking in the airport context will be less concerned about tracking in other contexts and eventually throughout society at large. So some people might say, oh, Bolden, you're being alarmist. They're not going to use this everywhere. Well, give me an example of where they started a program that they didn't expand it. I mean, taxes, what were those supposed to be? 2% on the rich, supposedly, back when they put that in? And where are they now? The social safety net, Social Security, expanded to Medicare Part D, and then to Medicare, then Medicare Part D, then Obamacare. And then now even the repeal and replace proponents don't even talk about getting rid of it. Republicans used to campaign on getting rid of the Department of Education. Now they only campaign talking about fixing it or getting the right people in charge. So this stuff, when it comes to government always wants to increase their own power. So this is really an excellent article. They point out some test reports from ACLU on Amazon's facial recognition, and I did a show on this recently as well. Recognition, REKOG is what they call it. Comparing the official photos of 435 members of Congress. I love that they did that test with publicly available mugshots. The ACLU found 28 false matches in 435. Now, Customs has claimed to have a 98% accuracy rating in their pilot programs, even though OIG, the Inspector General, could not verify that. So they're claiming that they have 98% accuracy. But if you're talking about, let's say they expand this to millions of people, 2%, and this is what India points out in her article for EFF, 2% would cause thousands of people to be misidentified every day. And if that misidentification ends up being with tying to a watch list, for example, and you can't fly or you can't buy a gun because of the NRA-backed instant criminal check system, the NICS system, if you get falsely identified for something through facial recognition with a 2% error rate, then maybe you can't defend yourself. You can't travel. You can't do all kinds. You're like restricted from potentially doing all kinds of things. And we know that this is the type of stuff that they do. And even if it were 100% accurate, I would still make the case. I'm not the type, and I know Cato Institute does this a lot. They focus primarily on the effectiveness of government programs, pointing out that they fail, and they do. But if someone can make the case that they're successful, that doesn't mean it's okay to violate people's rights, because people's rights should not be violated whether it's a supposedly good idea or effective program or not. And Logan says, it's the price we pay to live in a civilized society. And of course, that's what they always say. People who love the state, love centralized power. But they don't pay attention to how they think small. And I think this is what I was kind of getting to earlier, talking about how this is an an uninformed and ignorant and a lazy society, when you think just small picture like, oh, I'm afraid of terrorists taking down an airplane, so I want everyone to be not only inconvenienced but have their rights violated by an organization that does a crappy job at security because I'm too lazy to actually look into it. You're thinking short term. People who don't think big picture are lazy and not really smart about stuff. And maybe that's the Twitter society that we live in. We've all been kind of bred into this hand-fed, short, immediate information. But it takes willing participants, people who are willing to do that. Instead of looking at the internet and the tools that we have as a way to expand our intelligence, promote our own individual strength and our own liberty, a lot of people have become lazy because of it, and that is an individual issue. So they're claiming 98% accuracy. Who cares? I mean, if it's 100%, it still shouldn't exist, and neither should the TSA. And they also wanted to point out this report from CNN, my favorite CNN. U.S. airport opens first fully biometric terminal. And I'm no fan of CNN. I don't like it. I don't like any of the mainstream news sources, MSNBC. I don't like Fox. I don't like any of them. They're all junk. They're all propaganda-filled. They're pro-government. They're pro-big government, even when they oppose one program or one politician over another. They're really bad. But this is kind of instructive to at least kind of see some pictures of what's going on in Atlanta. And I know Joseph Standridge says he lives there, and I don't know. Maybe you can validate what this is like. It's pretty rough to have to choose to do that. I mean, I guess the only option would be to drive to another airport or not travel or make a long road trip. I did this years ago because I hated the TSA, and I was speaking at Liberty Forum, where I got this shirt that I'm wearing today. It's from the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance and the Free State Project. It's an annual conference that's really awesome. I think it's around February or March every year. And I spoke at the event that year. I was one of the keynote speakers. And so I was lucky to do that. But I didn't want to take a plane. It was a protest. So I took the government-funded Amtrak system, which is also its own problem. But at least the security was courteous and nice, and they didn't pat me down. They didn't treat me like a criminal. And I blogged about it as much as I could. The Wi-Fi was pretty garbage. The human body does not smell too well after 72 hours on an Amtrak. So when I got to my sister's in Boston, I showed up at her house, and she said, first thing you're doing before you touch anything is get in the shower. I mean, it was a fun experience. And I went with my lovely partner, Sarah. She was kind enough to go with me. I don't think she's going to go to too many events after that experience, and definitely not on a train ever again cross country. But this has been a problem for a long time, and we don't have a lot of options around it. And I saw there was a question, Spencer, any news of states taking action to not comply with biometric data collection? I don't know the answer to that, but because I've been talking about this so much lately, it has been on my mind, and I want to talk about this with Mike Meharry and Clay Davis to see if they've seen anything, and I will keep an eye out for it. That is a pun, I guess, when I'm doing my legislative research. In the past, I have done searches. I use legiscan.com to look up bills that are filed for DNA collection, for example. And generally, the bills that I've seen filed have been to encourage more DNA collection. I will also start doing searches for facial recognition, for retinal scan, maybe just biometrics in general to see if there's something to that. Because if you ban, if you can't stop them from using the devices to collect the information, you can at least ban them from storing it and sharing it. And that will cut down heavily on how the information is getting pervasive around in all these databases. I would like to see, for example, a ban on using drones for warrantless surveillance. But then also, for those states that have done that already, there are a few for those states, now to expand that to also ban them from doing biometric data collection. That's a possibility. I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my head. It's a really good question, Spencer. It's something I will look into a little bit further. So over here at CNN, before we get out of here, what if you could simply look at a screen for 2 seconds and check into your flight? Imagine glancing at a screen for another 2 seconds to drop off your bags at a luggage station. How easy would it be to merely look at another screen to breeze through ID checks at TSA security checkpoints or the departure gate? All this without having to use your passport. Well, now you can. And this is at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport and Delta Airlines. That's the airline that I use. And they're basically, it might as well be a press release from the TSA or the NSA or DHS. They're basically selling this. Like, oh, imagine how amazing this would be if you could just... And that kind of goes back to the comment I made earlier about how it almost seems like this was designed to be a mess and to be inconvenient for people. So then CNN Travel can publish how amazing it is going through Atlanta, where so many flights go, so many flights connect through Atlanta, about how wonderful it will be when all we have to do is scan our retinas, and then the government will allow us to get on that plane. They show some interesting pictures, of course. They start off with a family with a little child. Disgusting. It's more secure, they tell us. You're more secure because the government can scan your face, is what CNN tells us. Your face can be your passport. Of course, it can't be a restriction on how you're allowed to maybe get on a bus. Or maybe they tie it in with your credit score. If you've ever watched... I can't think of the Netflix show. They actually have a show where they basically tie people's credit or their social credit, like they're doing in China, with access to different things. And in this episode of the show, Black Mirror is what it's called, this lady couldn't even rent a decent car. She had to get one that only spoke some kind of Eastern European language that she couldn't understand, so she didn't understand the controls because her social credit score wasn't high enough. So what if your face gets tied into that? And you have to wait in a longer line. I mean, I'm talking about nightmare scenarios, but it certainly is within the realm of possibility. Your face can be your passport, CNN says. It has a 98% success rate. Of course, they parrot the same information. And this is why I say all mainstream media sources are government propaganda mouthpieces. They literally just take what the government tells them and they report on it. This is information. They're not doing like what EFF says. Oh, EFF says, look, even if it was just a 2% error rate, the bad thing is that thousands of people would be misidentified. And Logan Boydell asked an important question, the one that's never answered regarding biometrics. And I never see an answer to this either. What do you do when your biometric information has been hacked? You can't reset your fingerprint or change your retina. And more fearful to me than day-to-day hackers are the government ones or a misidentification. So the IRS has my name wrong in their system. It's Michael J. Bold. I thought that, and they don't say Bolden. And for years, they tell me that, that's the way it is. I actually went out of my way years ago to call them. I just ignore it at this point. Call them and say, you got my name wrong. How do we correct this? And they said, oh, you have to call Social Security. We get the names from Social Security. So you call Social Security. Of course, you wait forever. You can't get through. You try day after day. Finally, you get through. Oh, well, you got to do this. And you contact these people. And it becomes this impossible problem. They've misidentified me by name. I should actually show a letter from the IRS at some point. And it's been years, and I actually voluntarily told them that they had the name wrong and that they might want to correct their records if they didn't want to ever have any issues with that, which was probably dumb of me in the first place. And even telling them that they had my name wrong, they've misidentified me in text, they won't fix it. They can't. Or they send you to somebody else, so they don't know what to do with it. Can you imagine if you get misidentified, like Logan points out, that they've misidentified your fingerprint? We already know that this facial recognition, the test that they did on Amazon's facial recognition program, which is being pushed to Customs and Border Patrol and to local law enforcement as a government tool. So Amazon is providing services for some government agencies, that they misidentified 25 or so out of the few hundred members of Congress. What happens? You don't reset your face, as Logan points out. Spencer asks, does that mean you don't have to pay taxes? Well, that's a dangerous one. I don't want to. I never paid my Obamacare penalty. I refuse to do that, and I've said that publicly because they don't have a way to collect it. There's no mechanism in the system to do it, and they're actually in the system. They're banned from doing that. I'm assuming that they're going to continue collecting or racking up penalties on me. Well, I'll take that chance at this point. So they claim to have this 98% accuracy. Do they point out? What do they say at CNN? I didn't actually read it. In 2 seconds, you're cleared. In fact, about 1 or 2% of the time, face scans aren't able to verify passengers, said John Wagner, CBP Deputy Assistant Commissioner. He blames that on bad scan images, poor lighting conditions, for example. If you do get rejected, all you do is present your passport and your boarding pass. So CNN's version and the government's version is that 98% of the time they get it right. And 2% of the time they just don't. They can't do any verification. They don't ever make a mistake is what they're telling us. There's no mistakes. There's no misidentification. Even though ACLU did a test and found that Amazon's facial recognition program had a high error, high misidentification, not just failed to acknowledge, but misidentified with other people. And you can Google this as well. Google for a while, and they were totally embarrassed when you would do a search for various primates, it would show images of African American people. Like how bad the technology, I mean, it's very good, but they make some absurd errors with this technology. And we want to trust these people and this type of technology with our security. And even if it was great, again, I will just keep repeating it. Even if they got it right all the time, I don't want them to have this information. First of all, no one ever gets anything right 100% of the time. They do further down the article at CNN, they put some privacy questions. And Epic points out that there's some concern. But of course, we know from studies of internet research that about 67% of people never go below what's called below the fold. So when you pull up an article, what shows up before you scroll down is above the fold, and everything else is below it. So if you want to put something in an article that shows that you take a position so you can respond or refute claims that you won't even consider the other side, you just stuff it at the bottom. A vast majority of people. So 1/3 of people only scroll down at all. Any scrolling happens is only 1/3 of people on articles. The idea that they get all the way to the bottom here to privacy questions, I don't know, I would guess maybe 10%. And then, of course, they put the opposing part that you don't have to worry about this. Delta says the airline never has control of the database, et cetera, et cetera. And now they do note that it is expanding to other airports. So I think this is extremely dangerous. We shouldn't trust these people. We shouldn't be supportive of it. We should try to avoid using all these things at every turn possible. I keep my, like a crazy tinfoil hat wear, I keep my webcam covered with a piece of tape. I'm not going to join the pre-check program. I refuse to touch. I don't even touch the thumb scan on my phone. I won't even touch it when I pick it up. I should actually put a piece of tape over it too. Why not? I just don't want to upload this information. I won't do a 23andMe or Ancestry.com DNA test because we know that they're sharing that with law enforcement already. So the more that we refuse to participate in this, the harder it's going to be for them to build up the system. The question is, will we get a lot of people to refuse to participate? And that's really an important question going forward. I did not come up with a quote of the day. I have kind of been negligent on that, so I apologize. But I do hope you found this interesting, insightful. I hope you found it to be a fun conversation. I'm very grateful for those of you who spent some time here. Good to see EHP training show up late, and I appreciate all the comments from Spencer, Logan, Tommy Stock, Idamon, who else? Nada Sato, Joe Standridge, Bob Brewer, Alan Mosley, everybody else. I appreciate you all spending some time with me here today. I will be back again on Friday morning and, of course, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday here at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. Of course, if you enjoy the show, you find it interesting, smash that like button, whether you're watching video here on YouTube or later on in the archives on BitChute, Brighteon, Facebook, Twitter, or wherever. And then, of course, there's also the audio-only version of the podcast. We are now on iTunes, Google, and I just got approval yesterday for Spotify, which is awesome. They're now the #2 podcast provider out there. Not provider, but platform. And you can find access to all these other platforms if you go to 10thamendmentcenter.com/Good Morning Liberty. Right now, it's just an archive where you can scroll through it. I'm going to build a page that's dedicated to it, makes it easy to subscribe and access all the shows in the near future. Again, thank you for spending time with me today. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you on Friday for a show that I hope is going to be about Bill of Rights Day, which is on Saturday the 15th. Thanks again for watching. Have a great day.